Sorry, I'm just getting my screen set up here properly. Too many widgets open here. So, all right, folks, welcome to another Building with CloudFormation session. Today, we want to talk about VPC endpoints. So if you're not familiar, first off, you can see right here, what an endpoint allows us to do is communicate privately to services, supported AWS services, meaning supported by the Endpoints solution, and services running within your VPC. And what's great about these is they allow us to keep that traffic between an Amazon VPC and a service on the AWS network, so they don't leave the AWS network. That's why these are important. There are two types of endpoints you can deploy. These endpoints are, you can see here, horizontally scaled, redundant, and highly available. Okay, so that's really good. Less for us to manage. Some things we still need to take into consideration though. And there's two types of endpoints. There's interface endpoints and there's gateway endpoints. Let's start with the gateway endpoints. Gateway endpoints, essentially, they're free of charge, first off. They only support two AWS services. They support DynamoDB and they support Amazon S3, and they act as targets within your VPC. Essentially what we're able to do with a gateway endpoint is add a route that says, hey, if you're trying to get to S3, this is the path that you can go to get to that service. That's what a gateway endpoint does, okay, free of charge. Interface endpoints support a lot more services than just Dynamo and S3, and these act a little differently. These are going to deploy elastic network interfaces in your environment. Okay, and we're going to try to demonstrate both of these today if we can do it in a reasonable amount of time. So interface endpoints support many more services than S3 and DynamoDB. They deploy elastic network interfaces. They require a security group because they are ENIs in your VPC, so that's important to remember. And then the other thing that we need to just remember here is interface endpoints incur fees. Gateway endpoints are free, interface endpoints are not. So there's a couple things that we have to take into consideration here. Okay. What I think we're going to try to do today is, let me show you. I'm hoping this works. Let's see if we can switch our view here. Okay, so here's what I'm hoping to demonstrate, if we can get through all of this. What we've got is, in this example, let's change this to something that's maybe a little easier to see. We've got, we're going to create a VPC, which I've done already, did that ahead of time. Okay, there's our VPC. And then what we're going to do is, in this VPC, we're going to create just an EC2 instance as an example. And then outside of the VPC, in the same account, but outside of the VPC, what we're going to do is we're going to deploy an S3 bucket. Okay, so there's our S3 bucket. And all of this is within a single account. And to sort of show how this works, what we'll do is we'll demonstrate, how can I do this? I should have drawn this a little differently. Let's see if we can grab all of this. And can I just move it? Yeah, there we go. Let's drag it to the bottom of the page. This VPC in our example environment will be connected to the internet. Okay, so we've got this connectivity happening here. And what I want to show is what this will look like is, on this EC2 instance, we'll get the CLI up and running, and we'll just do something really simple like this. Okay, we'll run like an S3 copy command or something like that. And what happens in this case is the traffic leaves your EC2 instance, goes out over the internet gateway, across the internet to S3. So it's going over the public internet. Okay, that's the default way that this is going to work. And what we're going to do is we are going to, let me make this a little different. Let's get rid of this. And what we're going to do, just to demonstrate this, is we're going to deploy, I'm going to call it in this diagram GE. a gateway endpoint within the VPC. And at that point, what we will see is the traffic will go like, whoops, that's not what I wanted. Can I revert? There we go. What we'll see at this point is the traffic will go like that. Okay. So through the gateway endpoint to our S3 bucket. So let's start with this. Right, so this is a gateway endpoint. Okay, so this is our first step. Let's see if we can get through this, and we can continue to work on other deployment options here. Okay. So if we go back over here, you can see I started building some of this out already. Just the basic stuff. And let me just make sure I'm logged into our account here. So what we have so far, I created 2 VPCs because when I was getting ready for this, I wasn't sure how exactly I wanted to do these demos. So I thought this would be a decent way to start. So what we did was we created 2 VPCs, one called the source and one called our destination. You can see they have different CIDR blocks. What we're going to work on first is the source. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to deploy a couple basic resources in the source VPC to get that EC2 instance running. So this piece right here, okay, that EC2. That's what we want to do. And we're going to access the EC2 like we always do in these sessions. We're going to do SSM access. So what we need for that EC2 instance is, what's it called? An instance profile. Remember, an instance profile is the way that you can associate a role in IAM with an EC2 instance. Oh, hey, Kevin. Diagrams are helpful when talking. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm glad it's working. I wasn't 100% sure if I had it set up properly or not, but fingers crossed. Let's see if it works. Okay. So yeah, we're just saying we're going to set up that really simple IAM role with an instance profile. And I think we can probably just borrow from one of our earlier projects. I'm going to see if I can pull something out of one of the earlier demos, and we'll just kind of retrofit it. And then today, I don't think we'll bother creating our EC2 instance through CloudFormation. We've done that a bunch of times on the channel. So instead of spending time writing that template, we'll just stand up the EC2 instance manually, and then we'll test out some AWS CLI commands to talk to S3. Okay, so let's do that. I'm gonna build, let's check IAM because this is our little demo account and we use it for a lot of different things. And I bet you, there we go. Okay, so see this role? No, I'm going to build this. I was going to say let's use this role instead, but I'm going to build this from scratch because we need this policy. This is what's going to allow us to use SSM. But on top of that, we're going to need some additional rights, permissions to actually have our EC2 instance talk to S3. So actually, I think it's good that we build this one out. This might make sense. Okay. All right, so with that in mind, let's go back over here. And you can see what I started building out. There's the VPCs that we've deployed, and we deployed the destination and the source. And then just before the stream, I thought I could get this running, which doesn't have the depends on. Again, I just copied this from somewhere else. But before we deploy this S3 bucket, let's create our IAM resources. So we'll just call this IAM YAML, and then we're going to do this. We're just going to copy all of this here, and we'll dump this here. Okay. And for now, all we're going to do in here is we're going to create a role. Okay, we'll just leave that there, and we'll create, we will need a managed policy at some point, but we don't need it right away. So we'll create the role, and we will create the instance profile. And like we always do, we'll add the output section. So we'll come to that. Oops, we'll come to that a little later. Okay, so let's do this piece. And I'm going to pull up another browser here somewhere. Where did that go? I've lost my browser. Oh, yeah, I'm looking right at it. All right, so let me just get the CloudFormation documentation up for the IAM role. And again, we've done this a bunch of times, so if you've watched the stream in the past, this will look familiar. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to go like this. Assume role policy document, and for this I am going to borrow from here. So if we go back over to Firefox, this trust relationship will be exactly the same. Okay. Oh yeah, I'm not going to be able to borrow this exactly. JSON versus YAML, right? So let's see if we can build this out. Okay, so it's going to be version, always the same. And then we have a statement, which is going to be effect equals allow. The action will be just this, the single action. We'll put it like this, STS, assume role. The resource will be, actually, sorry, the principal. In this case is an AWS service. I always forget if it's service or AWS. So it's just EC2, Amazon, AWS.com, action, principal. What am I missing? Let me just quickly check that. Effect, principal, action. No, we're good. Okay, so that's good. Effect, action, principal. So that's all we need for that. What else can we put here? Oh, let's put a description on this. And we'll say description. Right? That's fine. We are going to add some managed policy ARNs, and this is where we can pull in the policy document for SSM. So we'll just do SSM. We should be able to find it here. This one right here. This is the one that we want. And we can grab the ARN from up here. So grab that. And then dump that here. That's that. Path, permissions, boundaries, role, name. We'll let Amazon name the roles for us. I'm just checking the, okay, and then tags. And tags we can grab from somewhere else because we want to use the same tags that we always use, this. And we'll dump that here, and we will get rid of the name tag. We don't need it. Okay, so that's the first part. So this is our role that will give our EC2 instance access to the SSM service. So that's good. And then let's go and create our instance profile next. And again, I'm going to keep that over on the other window here so I can just kind of read and type at the same time. I just have to find the, I think it's just manage, yeah, instance profile. So type is AWS. I'm going to put the depends on statement. I don't really think we need it in this case, but we'll add it anyways. And then properties. What do we need here? We won't worry about the instance profile name. We'll let CloudFormation deal with that. The path and then the role. And what's it want for roles? It wants the name. So all we have to do here is go roles and then ref role. Perfect. Now, the one thing that we didn't do was just, I know we're not going to do this today because we're not going to deploy the EC2 instance through the CloudFormation tool. We're going to do that part manually. But just to form the habits here, let's create a couple things. So we're going to create some outputs. The first is our role info. What does it return? Okay, so this, we could do this. We could do role name. Value is ref role, and then the export has a name, and this, do we have a bunch of these already somewhere? Scroll here, we can grab one off of this. Yeah, we just want this piece here. There, and we'll just call this name. Okay. That's all we need for the role. And then the same thing, we'll do the same thing on the instance profile. And its return value is also just a ref. So we can do this. We could say instance profile name. We'll say export name, and we'll just grab this. Oh, see what I've done here? I've got to do this. We've got to do role dash name, and we'll just call this profile, just to keep the name shorter. Okay, profile name. So that's what we need there, and then we can go back over here and add a few extra things. So let's add our validation. We'll say security IAM. So that's easy. And then for now, I'm going to change the order of these. I don't know why, but this just makes more sense. So what we'll do is we'll update the source here. I already added S3, and then we'll just copy this, and I'm going to put IAM at the top. Again, I just think it makes more sense. So source IAM, say source IAM. Right? We don't have to override any of our parameters, but we do need to add the capabilities statement here because we're dealing with IAM. So this is going to be, oh, what is this? I think it's just capability IAM, because there's two capabilities we can define. We can set, I don't know what that was. No idea what that was just on the screen there. What was I saying? Oh, there's two things we can do, right? With, let's say, use roles as the example. We can let CloudFormation name those IAM resources for us, like our role and our instance profile, or we can name them ourselves. We could put those values in our template. Those are our two options. So what we're doing here with this capability statement is we're saying capability IAM. That is basically saying we know we're acknowledging that we're creating IAM resources, but CloudFormation is going to name them. If you create the names yourself, then that has to be capability named IAM, I think it is. We're going to find out when we try to deploy it because it'll complain. Okay, so let's see what happens. Those are our updates. Did anybody else see balloons on the screen, or is that just me? I'm hoping somebody else saw that. Okay, so we'll send that, and then we will flip back over here. And yeah, you see I borrowed, this is one of the templates I borrowed from an earlier demo. So we'll go back here and we'll find interface endpoints, and we'll just make sure this pipeline deploys. A thumbs up emoji, because I did this. Oh, there we go. I don't have a clue how that's happening. How did I get the balloons? I have no idea how I did the balloons. All right, let's see what we did wrong. Doesn't like either of the things we just added. Oh, project. Yeah, this is the little magic. I know. I did something like this. I don't know what I did. That's weird. So yeah, project. We forgot about project. So we'll go back over here. And project. Sorry, that was IAM, right? That's here. Project equals project. Oh, you know what it is? See up here? We're not actually using that anywhere, so we can remove that. We're not putting the project tag in any of these resources, so that's fine. And I think we'll do one step at a time. So for now, I'm just going to take this completely out. Let's just make sure that our IAM resources work first. So we'll deploy this. We'll go back over here. And we'll run this again. I'm looking at the wrong screen. You're looking at a different screen than I am. There we go. So what's happening here? Okay, so there we go. Let's go back over here. We'll go to CloudFormation. And here's our change set. Yeah, so that's easy, right? A role and an instance profile. So we'll say okay. And that should go pretty quickly. Assuming that we have no typos. Does this work? Oh, look at that. Now I'm having fun. I'll have to do that. That can be the new thing when a stack deploys successfully. Maybe. I have no clue how this is working. I don't know if it's a Twitch thing or something else. I have no idea. It's taking forever. I always think when this happens that messed something up, but I know also the instance profile, for whatever reason, seems to take a long time. See there? It's here, create in progress. You'd think if it was going to error out, it would error out, but yeah, I don't know. I want to do the 2 thumbs up thing again. Come on. It's taking a break. And I can't go any farther until we get this because I need the instance profile reference when we create our EC2 instance. Maybe we could do this. Let's bank on the fact that that is eventually going to work. We'll go to EC2. Right? And we will, create a new instance. So this will be our Twitch demo instance, and we're not going to do anything fancy. We'll just leave it as Linux, Amazon Linux. We are going to change it to ARM processors so we can use the Gs, T4Gs. We're going to make a T4G small. We won't add a key pair. Oh, you know what we should do? Maybe we should create their security group programmatically because we're going to need that security. We're going to need additional security groups anyways when we do the, if we get to the interface endpoint piece, we'll need that. So why don't we, there we go. So we can try it again. Works. Perfect. All right, so let's go back to here and we will do under security, we're going to create, again, if you've watched the stream before, you'll know where this is going. So we'll just grab all of this. We'll say create, we'll say network. Actually, let's just call it SG. Okay. And for now, all we'll do is we'll create an EC2 SG. Now I have to look these up. I can never remember. EC2 security group. And we're just going to keep this really simple. So under properties, we'll say group description. We'll say SG for EC2 resources in Twitch demo. We won't worry about a name. We'll let that do it itself. And we're not going to add... Yeah, we need security group egress. Oops, keep doing that today. We'll do this. Okay, we'll just add the placeholder for now. We're not going to worry about any ingress. We don't need to allow anything to connect to this. Okay, so that's fine. VPC ID, we'll have to put it to do here. And then tags, which we'll grab from here. Let's grab this whole thing again, right? Dump it here. Now this will be our first example today of pulling in a stack. So we're going to say VPC stack is string. And this, let's go find one of our earlier demo projects. I'm just going to grab, remember that we use the intrinsic function import value, which we use all the time. And you'd think at this point I would remember, but I never remember it. So let me just get an example of it. I just have to find a template that actually has it. There we go. Okay, so all we need is this, and we'll say VPC stack. And I can't remember in our VPC template, again, that we use all the time, what is this? I need the ID. So in this case, this will give us the VPC ID up here. See the output VPC. So in this case, we can just do that. And now we need our egress rules. And all we're going to do here is we're going to set up, you know, let's do this. I want to see what this does. I should remember what this does. When it creates the security group, when you create a security group through the management console, you get nothing allowed inbound and everything allowed outbound. But I don't know what it's going to do in the template. I can't remember. So let's let it go like this first and just see what we get. Okay, so return values. What might we need here? We might need the security group IDs later. So we'll say EC2 SG ID. The value of this is just ref EC2 SG. And the export will copy from over here. All right, so I'm just going to say EC2 SG ID. Okay. Actually, let's make it EC2. And then we can update our GitLab scripts. And here we'll say security SG. And then we can drag this over here. And we can take this. We can do that. And we'll say SG. Oh, you know what we need? We need VPC stack information here, because we're going to pass this in. So that means parameter overrides. We need to have VPC stack equals VPC stack. I think that'll do it. You know, we could also do this. We could say needs, just to set up the, there's a fancy name for this in GitLab, but basically the order in which the jobs are run. So in this case, we're going to say this needs that. Okay. Okay, we'll push that. This is where I borrowed our template from. So we can go back to the other one we're working on. This one. And see how we did. So far, so good. Okay, there we go. This should, as long as we don't have any typos anywhere, this should be okay. Right, good. Now, the one thing is, what did it actually create? So if we look at the security group, no inbound rules, that's fine. All outbound. So there we go. We don't need anything here. That's the simplest thing we can do. So now let's create our EC2 instance. Okay, so what did we call it? Twitch demo. Let's just call it that. We'll leave this the same. We'll do that. We'll change this just to a small. Make that nothing. And then we want to make sure that we're putting this in the right spot. So I want this in the source VPC in a private subnet. And we are going to use an existing security group, which is this one. Okay. That's fine. We don't need any storage. And then the other thing that we did was this is our EC2 instance profile, this one that we want right here. That gets our role assigned to this machine. So there we go. And one other thing again, and not necessary for what we're doing, but always thinking about forming habits around best practices. We want to control the version of metadata, so we're going to set that to version 2. More secure than version 1, basically. We'll launch that. While we're waiting for this, this is actually, remember I mentioned at the beginning of the stream that there's the 2 types of endpoints, gateway endpoints, and then, oh, I did it again. I don't know how I'm doing that. Gateway endpoints and interface endpoints. So here's an example of when I can talk about a gateway endpoint. Not a gateway endpoint, sorry, an interface endpoint. So if we go back over here, let me show you this. So what we have right now, I won't draw the whole diagram. Let's do it like this. Okay, we'll say we have a VPC, and within that VPC we have an EC2 instance, and we've got this VPC connected to the internet. Okay, now we're talking about another service here. We're talking about SSM. SSM, the Systems Manager service, great service by the way, one of my favorites. We use it all the time. It's a fantastic way to manage your fleets of machines. You can do change management, you can do remote access like this. It's got its own ops console. It's pretty slick. SSM though is not part of a VPC, so it exists out here. Okay, and what we're doing now is we're basically, what's happening here is this type of communication is happening. Right? It's going out over the public internet to SSM, because SSM, like I mentioned, isn't in the VPC. We could address this, and maybe that's the example we could do later in the stream if we have time. We could address it by deploying an interface endpoint here, which then would allow the communication to go like that. Okay, again, staying on the AWS network. That might be a good way to do it. I have a theory on how I'm getting that balloons, so let's try it. Let's go back here first. No? There we go. So the peace sign gives you balloons. Mystery solved. Okay. All right. So let's refresh this. Here's our EC2 instance. And you can see down here, metadata version 2 is required. There's our role, and we can say connect. And now we can go to Sessions Manager, and again, if you've watched the stream, you've seen me do this 1,000 times. We can do sudo yum update. Great, nothing to do, right? Brand new instance, so we're connecting to the internet here. going out through our internet gateway out to the internet, and we're using SSM to connect to this machine. So that's the first step. If we do this now, AWS dash version, we get version 2. You can see AWS CLI 2919. So we're running version 2 of the AWS CLI. So another good situation. Let's go back now and fix that S3 deploy, because what I want to do now is I want to be able to see our EC2 instance communicate, right? If we go back over here for a second, right? Simulating that purple line, meaning we run a command on our EC2 instance, which is talking to S3, therefore it's going out over the internet to talk to S3. That's our first sort of demonstration here. So we're going to get this S3 bucket set up and running. And if you remember, we had it already, but it threw an error. And I didn't look at the errors, so all we're going to do is we're going to just dump this back like this. And we'll just deploy it. And we'll just go back and look at the error message again. Okay. Dump that. Go back over here. Just wait for this to deploy. Oh, you know what? You know what I didn't do? Well, I'm pretty sure I didn't do. Oh, no, we did change the stack name. All of a sudden I was like, copied and pasted that and didn't change the stack name. But that's good. Okay, here we go. Change set. And we didn't do anything fancy in this S3 bucket. I'll show you here in a second when it's deployed. We didn't, it's encrypted, it's private. We blocked public access, all that kind of stuff. But we didn't turn on anything like logging or anything like that. Nothing fancy. Just need an S3 bucket. If we were deploying this for real, then I would suggest you spend more time on the template and make sure that it does everything that you want. But here's our bucket. We're going to change this bucket a little more later on, but if we go into properties, you can see that we've got versioning disabled. We have tagged it. We're just using server-side encryption using S3. Instead of in the streams, normally we set up our own customer managed keys. For today, we're not going to worry about that, but it is secure. Okay. We have no access logging or anything like that turned on. Okay, but it's here and nothing in it. Right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back over here and we're just going to run, let me make this a little bigger maybe. It's maybe a little easier to see. Kevin, is that a little easier to see like that? Just zoomed in a bit. Is it big enough? Looks good from my side, but I don't know what it looks like on the stream. We're good? Size? Okay, let's do it. So if we do this, AWS S3, LS S3, I should have done this. Oof, now this is a little too big, but it'll work for what we need. I already forget what we called it. This one. Okay, so we're going to copy the ARN, go back over, where was it? Here. That's totally not what we needed. We just actually need the name. So we can do this, AWS S3, LS S3. Oh, I don't want to type all that. The chances of me typing that correctly are very low. So let's do this. Now we get an access denied, which is good, right? Because remember, by default, IAM denies all actions. And if you remember when we set this up, when we created our EC2 instance and we put that instance profile on it, all it had was access to SSM, no access to S3. So let's go and add some additional permissions to this. so that we can actually start running some of these commands. Okay, so we're going to flip back over here, and we'll go to IAM. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create, let's just call it endpoint, no, let's just call it EC2 managed policy. And this again I have to look up, so just give me a second. You'd think at some point, since we write the same stuff all the time, that some of this stuff would eventually just stay in your head, but it does not. I have to find, what are we looking for? AWS, I think it's just managed policy. Let me see if I can search for this in the doc. Yeah. Can remember the names, the type definitions, but can never remember the properties. So description, let's just do this. Customer managed policy for EC2 Twitch demo, just like our other ones. Groups, managed policy name path. Okay, so what we need is our policy document. Now, what's the best way to do this? Oh, sorry, Kevin, I'm rereading your comment there. And yes, so balloons is, there you go. Okay. So you're correct. Mystery solved. So the question is, what do we want to do here? Because these policy statements, they can get complex as far as with S3, well, with anything really, right? We've got the ability here to create really granular permissions documents. So we want to try as best we can to practice this idea of least privilege in the stream. So let's just do our famous placeholder. And then in this case, what we're going to do is we need the ARN for identifying, in this case, what we should maybe do is, actually I've got this wrong. We got to go like this. Statement, let's do this. Statement ID S3 access. And then we'll say effect is allow, action is some sort of S3 actions, and then we'll say resource, and we need a resource. We need a resource definition here. And that'll be our S3 bucket. Okay, so the resource definition for our S3 bucket is easy. We actually saw it already. If we go back over here, let me zoom back out for now. And we go back here, go to buckets, go to source, say copy ARN, and then we'll flip back to PyCharm. And we could just dump that here, right? And we want to tie it to this particular bucket. So that will be fine. I don't like the way this, like I want to make this, yeah, I think for now this will do. And then the question is, what actions do we need to allow? Now in my example here, what I'm thinking is simple gets and puts would be enough to at least demonstrate that this works, right? So why don't we, the way you find these, it's not necessarily fun, but Amazon has these all well documented here, right? And you can see down the left hand side all of the AWS services, and then when you find the service that you want, there's a bunch of useful information. First off, if you didn't know what the service identifier was, it's in the first line. And then we can scroll through this and look at all the actions that are available to us, if they're read and write, and any additional information that we might need or want to provide. I think what we're going to try to do today is do something that will give us enough, right? So see this here, get object ACL. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this. Okay, so we'll say S3 get object, S3 get object ACL, and we're going to need to, I really don't like the fact that we're hard coding these in here, but that should work. And then we'll need the corresponding put object and S3 put object ACL. I think that's all we need. Now, the list permissions are always more challenging to get figured out. So let's scroll down, excuse me, and we'll find, see the list here? So you know, list is just list. In our example here, we could tie this to specific things, but why don't we just do, so go into by the authenticated user grants permissions to list some or all the objects in a bucket. Okay, so why don't we do something like this? And again, I'm not quite sure. Oops, I'm clicking the wrong thing. Let's try this again. Here, we could do S3 list bucket. Let's try that. And then the next thing we need to say is depends on role, and we need to assign a role to this. So we can just go here and say roles ref role 0. Or actually, we just called it role in this case, yeah. Okay, so this is going to create the managed policy and then assign it to the role that we created earlier on. Okay. Okay, and while we're waiting for that, what we'll do, actually, let's make sure the pipeline runs first. And then as long as the pipeline's running, we will then just create a little test file that we can use. So that the validation works. So let's go back over here and, right? So we'll just say vi test text. Okay, so that's what we'll use for that. And we should by now have a new change set. So this is our managed policy that we're adding. As long as there's no big typos in there, this should work. Okay, that looks good. And while we're waiting for that, let's go back to the role view. And there we go. So this is the AWS managed policy. That's the SSM one, and here's the one that we just created. So let's test this. What we can do, zoom back in here. I gotta copy that again. Let's see now if we have enough permissions to do this. There we go. That worked. We've got, there's nothing in the bucket. Okay, so we know that worked. Now what we could do is we could do AWS S3 CP and, oops, where am I? Okay, so we're in the right spot. So we can do AWS S3 CP, our test file, not ampersand, ampersand. Oh boy, AWS S3 CP test.text. There we go. So that worked as well. If we flip back over to our bucket, there we go. That worked. Now just to demonstrate the permissions that we have, if we did S3, I think it's just, is it RM? So like to remove a file? Yeah, so we just need the S3 URI. So we could do S3 /test.text. and we get an access denied there because all we did was we gave us those two permissions, right? One to get objects and get object ACLs, and then the other is to run put objects and put object ACLs. So that makes sense. And then if we did we run our list command here just to show that this works? Okay. But remember, if we flip back over here, what's happening right now is this path, the purple line, right? We're going out of our network, like off of the AWS network to S3. So let's change that. The way that we change that is with a gateway endpoint. A gateway endpoint will create for us, oops, I can go back. I'm in the wrong spot, aren't I? What am I trying to do? Here. If we create the gateway endpoint, then what we can do is basically, I'm going to zoom in a bit more here. That's better. Create a gateway endpoint as a route target within our VPC. And remember, gateway endpoints only support S3 and DynamoDB. They're free of charge. And what they'll do, I'll show you in a second. Once we create it, it essentially creates what's called a prefix list for us. And the prefix list will provide us with ranges of IP addresses that represent the service, in our case S3, in the region where we're deploying this solution. Right? So let's zoom out so we can make our screen a little, not easier to read, but more info on it. And we can go over to, we'll leave that open. And we'll go here, VPC. And we'll go to endpoints. And we've got no endpoints at this point. Oh, I'm on the wrong screen, sorry. We want to go here. This is what I was looking at. So I went to the VPC console and I just selected endpoints on the left-hand side. And we've got nothing here. Okay? So let's create that. What I think we'll do is, in our structure here, we're going to go here and we're going to say endpoints. And then we'll go gateway. Okay, so this will be our gateway endpoints. And then I don't think it supports any tagging, but we're going to do this. And we'll say VPC gateway endpoint. Okay. So that's good. Oh, one other thing, just to show you, if I go here, okay, so now I'm on my laptop. I could do AWS S3 LS, and I'm pretty sure, yeah, oops, I knew that wasn't going to work the way I wanted. So I could do AWS S3 CP S3, just to demonstrate that I can get to that S3 bucket as well from my home laptop. Let me just grab the S3 bucket name again. Okay, if we go back to PyCharm, actually I don't want to run a CP command. I want to run an LS command, so we can do this. Oh, I got a space at the beginning of it. Hang on one second. So if we go back over here and do this. Now in my case, I'm going to have to use a profile to connect to the right account. So we'll do that. It'll prompt me for my MFA key, which I have to get. So just give me a second. If I can type my password, give me a sec. There we go. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm going from my actually, let's do it this way. If we go back over here, this is me, right? And my connection right now is going like this to that S3 bucket, right? Over the internet to that S3 bucket. So that's what we're doing there. Okay. All right, so that's that part. Now, what we need to do in here is just set up our gateway endpoint. So let me find this. So let's do S3, we'll call it GW endpoint. Actually, do I need GW? Because we've called this gateway, so I'll just say S3. Okay. That might be reserved. Let's do this. So type VPC endpoint, and then properties. I'll show you this in a minute, but the first thing to keep in mind with endpoints is they also support policy documents. Policy documents, remember, are permissions documents that are embedded directly into the service. And what's great about the resource policies is that they allow us to add additional layers of protection to our environments. Okay. Identity policies created and maintained within IAM. Resource policies are created and maintained within the individual services. Okay. So that's what we're doing here. And we just got some mood lighting in here. For now, I'm going to not put a policy document on because I want to again show you some examples of how this works. So the first thing is, actually, let me show you these ones since we've never seen this on the stream before, and we'll walk through the document just so you get a sense of what it is we're creating. Okay, so we jump over here. So there's the policy document. For now, we're not going to put a policy document on it, so we don't have that additional layer of protection. The first thing that we need to decide is private DNS. So you can see here the description, whether to associate a private hosted zone with the specified VPC, contains a record set, blah, 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 blah. So this enables us to make requests to the default public DNS name for the service instead of the public DNS names that are created automatically. Yeah, see here, this is the important part. I was going to say I don't think we need this for gateway endpoints. So this is only required for interface endpoints. So we won't worry about that. Route table IDs we do need. So these are, remember, this is just adding an entry in our route tables for us. So what we're going to do here is we are going to add the route tables of our two private subnets. So that means anything deployed in those private subnets will be able to route traffic through that route table to the S3 bucket in our example. Okay, so let's build that piece out. So if we go here, it is going to be route table IDs, and then we're going to put both of our private subnets. Okay, so we'll put placeholders for those for now. And that means that we're going to need to pull those values from our VPC stack. Okay, so that's what that is. What else do we have here? Security group IDs, we do not need those for gateway endpoints because they're just route tables, so not required. We need the service name for our endpoint. Okay, so let's do that. Back over here and say service name. Again, we'll just put a placeholder for the time being. I want to get all the properties laid out first. We don't need subnet IDs. Those are for interface endpoints only. We do need to define the VPC endpoint type, and it's either gateway, gateway load balancer, or interface. So let's get that one set up here. And we're going to do this, VPC endpoint type, just to use parameters rather than hard coding this stuff. We'll say type is string. The default value, was it case sensitive? I think it is. Let me just check. Yeah, it is case sensitive. Okay. So it's going to be gateway, and then we'll just say allowed values. We won't worry about the gateway endpoint. We'll just do these. Sorry, the gateway load balancer endpoint, or whatever that third one was. We're just going to do one of these two values. So that'll pull that in. Yeah, gateway load balancer. And then the VPC ID. So this is how we associate it to our VPC. Okay, so we'll say VPC ID. And we can grab these values. Where did we pull those in before? Oh, in our security group. So this will be the same. And then here, we just need to look that value up. I don't remember what it is. So if we go to the outputs, and we want our two private subnets. So, oh, sorry, not subnets, route tables. So we're going to do this. So there, copy this whole thing, and make a route table 1. Okay, and now we just need the service name. So let me pull this page up. Let me just find this, and then I'll show you what I'm looking at. Okay. So this is the list of all the AWS services that are supported by the VPC endpoints. So actually, why don't I do this? Can I do this? I wanted to see that. I don't have, I need to set up my my streaming environment a little better. I don't have any way to see my chat window. Oh, I think I can do it right from here. Okay, so there's the URL to this page, and then what we want to find in here is just, oh boy, S3. Okay, so this is what we need right there. And we're going to say sub, because you'll notice that this is region specific. So we're going to use the pseudo parameter AWS region to fill that in for us. So that's all we need here. That'll create for us our gateway endpoint and associate it to both of these route tables. Okay, and then that means we can go here, and we can grab this, and we can say endpoint/gateway. I feel like we've missed something here. IAM VP. Oh, we never put our, no, SG is there. Oh, we never added S3, did we? Storage, just to make it go through the validation phase like that. And then in destination, not destination, we're not working on that, right? We're working on source. This one. We can do, I guess we can just grab this. And we'll say VPC gateway, call it like that. And then we'll just say VPC, let's do gateway VPC like that instead, shorten it up. Okay. It does need the VPC stack because we referred to that. Networking, did we call it networking? Yeah. And then endpoints and gateway. Okay. Right. So if we head back over here, let's see how our deploy does. Okay, it's already deployed, so let's jump back over here. Oh, you know what? Remember what I said before? I thought I did in the other stack. I didn't. No, I did change the stack name. I keep thinking that I'm forgetting the stack names. There it is. So again, super easy. All it's doing is adding the S3 gateway endpoint in this case. So let's see if we've got everything here set up. Okay, easy, right? Now, if we go back to here and we go VPC, we should just favorite that. Now if we go to endpoints, there's our new endpoint. And you can see it's a gateway endpoint that's pointing to the S3 service in CA Central 1. And if we go over here and we filter by our VPC, our source VPC, and we go to route tables, remember we added it to the two private, I don't know why it does that. VPC, what's it end in? 21? Okay. If we look at the private route tables, what you're going to see now is this. This is the destination that was added by that gateway endpoint deployment. And this is a prefix list. If you've never seen prefix lists before, let me find you something here. Give me a second. We did a demo of prefix lists ages ago. Prefix lists are really interesting because there's two types of prefix lists. There is the AWS managed prefix list, which we have here. And then you can also create your own customer managed prefix lists. So it's a great way if you had, like, as an example, let's say you're setting something up and you have a bunch of branch offices that you want to connect back to your AWS environment. Instead of in your security groups adding each IP range for, let's say, your 10 branches, what you could do instead is create a prefix list that represents all of your branch locations. And then in your security group, you could say, I'll make it up, allow port 80 from this prefix list, which would then include all of the IP addresses that you've included. And like I said, let me see if I can find this here, prefix list. Yeah, so if you wanted to go back and look at this, this is, how long ago was this one? I'm trying to find how to just generate a link off of it. Give me 1 second. So I can share a link with all of you. Analytics, great, that's fine, that's fine. I know I've done this in the past. This is from 2020. Wow. Okay, hang on 1 sec. I'll just see if I can find this for you quickly as I'm scrolling through things. There we go. Okay, so get shareable link. So there's something that you can look at if you'd like to. There's the link. Okay. All right. So this is an Amazon managed prefix list. If we go into here, what you'll see is a logout screen. Let's try it again. That means all of these are now useless. Okay, let's try that again. So if we go back to VPC, and we just go endpoints, and we select this, and we go to, oh, sorry, I did it through the route tables, didn't I? This way. And we'll filter up here by VPC, which is 21. And then we'll say private, few clicks to go. And then here's our prefix list. And if we select this, right, it gives us the details. Here are the entries. So what we're getting here are the CIDR ranges for the service, in this case S3, in the region where we've deployed this. So these are all the ranges of IPs where S3 exists for the Canadian region, because that's where we're working. That's all this is doing, right? So now what we have is in our route tables, at least in the private and the two private route tables, we have a route to get to S3. You'll notice here that our public route table does not have that. So that means if we did have something in our public subnets associated with one of these route tables, that traffic would still flow like our original diagram here. Okay? It's going to flow from the EC2 instance. Let's assume in this diagram now that our EC2 instance is sitting in that public subnet. It's still going to go out over the internet to S3. The EC2 instance sitting in our private subnet is now going to go through that gateway endpoint to the S3 service. From our perspective, like if we go back over here and we go to EC2 again, and I keep having to search for these. Let's do it this way instead. If we go back over here and go back to our EC2 instance and we run the same commands that we did before. Right, so if I just do AWS S3 ls S3, I should have named this bucket so that we didn't have to remember all these names, right? Let's go S3. We'll just keep adding to our shortcut list. If we find this guy, nothing's changed, right? It looks exactly the same. Oh, that's probably pretty small on your side. So if I zoom in, right, nothing's changed here. It looks exactly the same. Command works just like normal, okay? And if we do just sort of another quick demo of this, if we go back to PyCharm and I do this, works exactly the same. The difference in these two situations is, one, the EC2 instance is now using that prefix list to stay on the Amazon network. From my laptop, I'm still going over the public internet to S3. We talked earlier on about this idea of resource policies. So now let's have a look at resource policies as a way to control the access through, in this case, the gateway endpoint to our S3 bucket. So let me find the docs for this, and then I'll share my screen. I'm hoping, this usually takes a little bit of work to get set up, but I'm hoping that there's a decent demo here that we could use to at least get this working. So here's the gateway endpoint. Maybe I'll share this as well in chat. All right, so that's the documentation for the gateway endpoint for S3. And what we're looking at is, we've done all of this stuff so far. We need that VPC endpoint policy, actually this one here. Okay. So you can see what's happening here is we can create a bucket policy that requests or that restricts access to a specific endpoint by using the source VPC. Actually, this is a bucket policy, so this is on the S3 bucket. This here. Yeah, okay. So we've got the ability to tie together VPC endpoint policies, but then we also have bucket policies as well. This is showing you that we're restricting access to a specific bucket on our endpoint. So we're saying allow specific access to a bucket, all principals, specific operations to that bucket. Here we're saying allow only a particular IAM role access to the bucket behind there. And then what's this one? Restrict access to users. What's the best way to do this? I think what we'll do is we'll actually we'll do the gateway endpoint instead. Because in this case, what would be good is, see this right here, the condition, the string is basically what we're saying is deny all principals the ability to run specific API calls against the bucket and the objects within the bucket if they are not coming through this VPC endpoint. And this will demonstrate for us the fact that our EC2 instance should still be able to communicate with this S3 bucket, but from my laptop we shouldn't. So let's build this actually. So we're going to put this as a bucket policy on our S3 bucket, okay, rather than a VPC endpoint policy. So we'll go back to PyCharm, I think we want to be in. Yes, here we go. And we will go to our S3 template, and then we'll just call this bucket policy. I don't remember what this is. Might just be called policy. Yeah, it's just bucket policy. Okay, so properties. And what do we need for this? Again, maybe I should pull this up because we haven't done one of these on the stream before. So let me dump this here. And we'll go over here. Pretty basic, right? We need a bucket reference and then we need the policy document. So pretty simple. So what we can do is go here and just say bucket, and we can refer to bucket 0. Let's do the depends on thing again. All right. And then here we'll just say, I forget already what it was. Policy document. Right? All right, so. And our policy document will look like any other policy document we've created before, 1017, statement, and then we're going to say, let's create a SID like we did before, and we'll say allow, what could we do? We could do allow, let's just call specific S3 actions, and we'll say effect is allow. We're going to apply this to everybody, so we're going to say principal is star, and then we're going to say action, and let's kind of mimic what they did in that example. We're going to allow people to, what do we want to do? We can think of 3 basic actions, right? Puts, gets, and deletes. So let's say we're going to allow gets from anywhere. Like I can still run a get from my laptop, let's say. But I can't run a put or a delete unless I'm coming through the VPC endpoint. So we'll do this. We'll say S3 put object, S3 put object ACL, S3 delete object, right? And then we're going to say condition. I think it's conditions. No, it's, I had a 50-50 shot. It's condition. And then let me pull up that example doc here, and we'll just copy this. I'm just going to dump it into another browser so I can see it at the same time. Oh, I did the wrong thing. We want to allow specific S3 actions via endpoint. Okay, so we want to actually deny. We want to do the opposite. We want to deny all principals the ability to. So from my laptop, I want to be able to get only, but I can't put anything and I can't delete anything. That makes sense. Okay, and we're going to say string not equals. Now this is going to be interesting here. How are we going to do this? And AWS source VPC E equals, and this is the VPC endpoint. So you know, if we flip back into the console, if we're over here, let's do this again. All right, that's our VPC endpoint ID. So that's what we have to refer to in our S3 bucket. So the question is, from here, what return values do we get? The ID, that's exactly what we want. Okay, so that means we have to make a couple other changes. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back over to here, and we're going to add outputs, and we'll say this is S3 endpoint. The value is ref S3. Oh, this should be S3 ID, like that. And we'll say endpoint. Right. And then the export will be name. And then just like we've done throughout, we're going to grab this. And we'll just make this ID. Okay? So that's that part. That will be the output that we have to refer to in the bucket policy. And so if we go back over here, then what we can do is we can do this. We can say gateway. We better be careful here because we might end up with different ones. So we'll say, yeah, we'll say gateway endpoint stack. Okay. And we'll borrow again from, where did we pull one of those in from earlier on? Remember we ran that here, this guy. Go back over here. We'll say this, and I already forget what we called it, just dash ID. Okay. So we're saying deny. Basically, we're saying I'm gonna change this. I like to look at it like this: deny the following actions. So put objects, put object ACL, delete object for all principals if the string does not equal the source VPC endpoint as our VPC endpoint. Okay. That reminds me of one other thing that we haven't done. Up here, we need to go like this: S3 delete object, right? We don't have those permissions right now. Okay, so let's set feature updated S3 with a resource policy. Okay, that's good enough for now. Push this. We had a good run. Here, let's see if this works. That doesn't work. That doesn't do anything. How about like 2 thumbs down? There we go. All right. Okay, so what did we do wrong here? Gateway unresolved dependencies S3 endpoint in the outages. Oh, outputs. Okay. Oh, just, yeah, I should actually change that because that's not camel case, right? So that should fix that. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, where am I going? I'm going back to Firefox. That's better. We made it through the validation phase at least. Now we have to remember a couple things here. Before we push any additional changes, we need to, remember we added that output? I already forget where that was. We have to go through and just make sure we run some of our other stack updates first because we're going to rely on those outputs somewhere else. Yeah, look at, this is the other issue. Okay. I have to go back here, and in our source deployment, we now, in this stack, we're referring to the gateway stack. So let's just reorganize these a bit so it's right. So here we need, then we're going to say GW VPC stack. How did we do this in the other one up here? GW VPC stack is this, right? Oof. Like that. Now, in our S3 policy, what did we call it here? Okay. Let's just make these the same. Easier to remember later on. Like that, okay? I think that would be the only problem. Oh, you know the other thing we should do? We should do that same thing now. Needs, job. We need to make sure this job goes first. Not that it really matters the way we're deploying, but just feels a little cleaner this way. Okay, so we go back over here. Let's see what happens. We'll go through all of the stacks and just make sure that, I think it's only the IAM one we changed. Man, I can't remember what we did there. The upgraded output or the updated output section. I don't remember which one that was. Isn't that amazing how quickly you forget? So let's just do this. I'm sure this is fine. We should have no change sets there. Okay, so we've got a couple IAM change sets. And what are we doing here in the managed policy? Oh, this is where we added, remember we added the additional permissions to allow delete objects. So we can execute this one. That should be able to stand alone. So we'll just go piece by piece here and make sure everything works. All right, that's good. We probably shouldn't have any change sets here. That's great. Now this one we have a change set, but this is gonna update our bucket policy. And in the bucket policy, we need the reference to the VPC endpoint that we created. So that means we gotta just, this should be, ooh, look at S3 endpoint. Why is it creating something new here? Let's just check this before we go any farther. What did we do here? That was where? Here? What stack was I looking at? Just give me one sec. Yeah, the gateway VPC stack. I wasn't actually expecting to see. I thought all we did was add this to export the endpoint ID, but it's, oh, you know what? Remember I said I'm going to change that so that it matches our, I'm changing the logical ID, therefore it's going to create a new resource. It should be fine actually. So let's see what it does. Go back here and we'll execute this, which will delete our endpoint and then create a new one because we changed the logical ID, but then also create the output. Okay. Oof. Route table has a route. Okay, so yeah, check your spelling before you do this stuff. Today, like if I'm just gonna go back like this is what it was originally called, and we'll just refer to it that way, even though it's not the sort of camel case standard we've been using. I don't want to have to delete a bunch of stuff and try it again. So I'd have to delete that stack and then add it back, which isn't really a big deal. This is sort of triggering. Let's do this the right way, just so it follows the other things that we've done. So we'll leave this for now, okay? And we have to redeploy this now because that other stack failed. So we'll just do something like this. Case change on logical ID, okay? Now, before we push that though, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back over here and I'm just gonna delete this stack. Oh, it's in cleanup in progress. It's always the easy changes that make you run into, well, more challenges than you would expect to see. These ones are always weird. Sometimes these rollbacks take a while for some reason. I don't know why. What could we work on in the meantime? You know what we could do? Just to remember, I mentioned about the interface endpoint example. So why don't we create a resource that at least the starting of that resource. Remember I mentioned when we did our little quick intro at the beginning of the stream that interface endpoints, remember their interface endpoints deploy elastic network interfaces in your VPC. Any elastic network interface within your VPC requires a security group. So interface endpoints therefore require a security group. So what we're going to do is we're going to create that security group. Interface, we'll call it interface endpoint SG. And we can actually just copy all of this, dump it here, and we'll say SG for interface endpoints. And the good thing about this is that all interface endpoints only require a single port. They need to be able to accept inbound traffic on 443. Okay. So how am I going to do this? I'm going to do this. We're going to say security group ingress, and now we need our ingress rule. So let me just get the format for this. Again, we've done this a ton of times on the stream. I just don't remember what it is. Okay, so the first thing we have to think about is, what do we want to allow to communicate through this security group to the interface endpoint behind it? Now we've got a couple different ways to do this. We could allow everything within the VPC, or we could allow a subset of the resources within the VPC. I think for today, what we'll do is we'll essentially say anything within the VPC can communicate with anything that is a member of this security group. Okay, so we're going to say CIDR IP, and we're going to put our famous placeholder. Okay, we'll come back to that. Description: allow all resources in the VPC to, let's just say, right? That's really what we're doing here. And we're going to say from port is always going to be 443. To port is 443. So we only have to open the one port. And I think that is it. So we need to grab the CIDR range for our VPC, which, if I remember, is right here. So it's just -CIDR. Okay, so we can take this, we can dump that here and say -CIDR. And then we'll do this. We'll say interface endpoint SG ID, and then we'll just copy all of this. We'll just say here, this, I don't want to make this name massive, so we'll just say VPC interface endpoint ID. That'll do the trick, I guess. Okay. And then we'll say feature SG for interface endpoint. Now let's see, before I commit that, let's see if this is done. Okay, rollback complete. So I'm just going to delete this whole stack. And then that way, when we push that change with just the logical name change, it'll be fine. It should work. Okay, that's fine. Now if we go back here, that'll run. That'll rerun our pipeline and hopefully will fix this for us. Okay, there's our SG deploying. What was the other one already? It was this one, the gateway VPC stuff, because we changed the logical name. Okay, so let's check our security group. We should have a change set here now, and we're adding the new interface endpoint security group. Okay. Oh, I forgot IP protocol. Here's our other one. Let's see if this works, because all we did here was change the name, right? So that should just recreate the endpoint for us. And while we're waiting for that, let's go back here and add our missing piece. So we just need IP protocol, and it's just TCP. Okay, so that's, I spelled that wrong. Protocol. Now, before I deploy that, let's just make sure our other thing deployed, our other stack. Otherwise, it could throw an error at us because another stack is in update or create mode. So that's that. We go over here. All right, so there's our gateway endpoint. That's good. Good. So let's do this one again. Hopefully we got everything we needed in our security group this time. We'll execute that, and then S3 should also have a change now. And this is to add our bucket policy. So let's say execute. Why am I hesitating here? Let's just check one thing. I wanna double check. The thing you have to be careful with on these bucket policies is we could lock ourselves out. And I just want to make sure we're not doing anything crazy here. So we're saying allow specific S3 actions via endpoint. So we're denying puts, put object ACLs, delete object for all principals. So any user, right? That could be us through the management console. That could be an application. It could be another AWS service. They must now communicate through this VPC endpoint. Okay, I think we're okay there. Okay, so let's go back here and execute this. The bucket policies are always challenging. Oh, this failed again? Oh, okay, no, it's good. And then if we go to resources, here's our really complicated security group. Inbound, we're saying allow inbound on TCP 43 from anything in the VPC. So remember when we created the gateway endpoint, we associated the gateway reference to only our two private subnets, right? So that means only resources from within those private subnets could communicate through that gateway endpoint to S3. The interface endpoint, we're doing this a little differently. We're going to put an interface endpoint in those in the private subnets, but we're saying anything in the VPC can communicate through the interface endpoint to the service on the other side. Okay. Let's see, did this work? All right, that worked. Now watch, if we did this right, we can go over here, we can go to our source bucket, and everything looks cool, right? We can see our properties, permissions. Why don't I have a bucket policy? I went to the right bucket, right? I did. Do we need to refresh? What's happening here? What did we do wrong here? Better yet, what did we update? Oh, look, it failed. That would make sense then. Statement is missing required element. What are we missing? Let's get rid of this. Effect, action, principle, condition. Where was my sample? I thought we took that right from the sample, didn't we? Oh. Yeah, we still need a resource definition. A resource definition would be helpful. Oops. Okay, so if we go back over here, resource, and then what they did in the example was you basically provide the ARN for the bucket. Now, if I remember, we can just do get attribute bucket0.arn, but we also want to apply this to all of the objects. So in this case, we're going to do something a little different. I'm going to use a join command to do this. And we're going to do it like this. So we'll say the join, the delimiter is that, and then we're going to take the ARN again. I'm going to dump that here, comma, star. So this is the bucket ARN, and this now is the bucket ARN / star. So that'll apply to all the objects within the bucket. Okay. So let's say fix added missing resource statement. Oops. It's kind of important. So push that. So I think what we'll do is we can get this bucket policy in. We can just demonstrate now that we've controlled access to that S3 bucket to basically, for what do we say? I keep forgetting. Gets, puts, and deletes. You must come through the gateway endpoint. So this is. Yeah, okay, so that's VPC. So we should be able to go back here and have a new change set, which hopefully we've fixed the problem with our bucket policy. There we go. Easy. Okay, so now if we go back to the bucket, what we should see now is permissions. There we go. So we're denying puts and deletes for all the objects in the S3 bucket, unless you're coming from this VPC endpoint. So watch this. If we go to objects and I say upload, and let me just find something from my laptop here. I was hoping just to have like a sample image or something small. Oh, here we go. This and say upload. See that? We get access denied. Why are we getting access denied here? Because through the management console, we're not talking to the VPC endpoint. We're not talking to the S3 bucket through the VPC endpoint. Access denied, right? If I do the same thing on here, remembering our bucket policy, we're going to deny delete object operations unless they come through the VPC endpoint. So what should happen here is we should go here and say delete. It'll say type permanently delete, and we get access denied. Okay. Now if we go back to our EC2 instance, we go to this machine, our Twitch demo machine, and connect. And let's do, let me zoom in again. Okay, So where are we? Here we go. So so we'll just save that, and we should be able to do what we did before. So we can say copy another test to S3. I should just paste this somewhere, right? So I don't have to keep coming back in here. Grab this, back over here. Worked, right? No problem. Put objects coming from here. Now I also gave ourselves permission now to delete objects. If I go back over here and we say AWS S3 RM and then do, we should be able to just copy this. Oops, I don't know if I got that or not. Let's try it again. Okay. Delete works. Now, if we flip back over, actually, let's put that object back. No, let's do it like this. We'll go back to PyCharm. And what I'm going to do is we'll just create a new directory, and we'll call it test images. Oh, I didn't change my screen. Okay. So I just created this, test images. And what we'll do is we'll just drag this file over here. Okay. And this is just a picture of Door Fortress. All right. And what we're going to do is we're going to go here and we're going to say AWS S3 copy. And we're going to say test images / first, and then we can do this. Okay. Oh, and I have to add -- profile CO demo. Give it our code. Upload failed, right? So access denied when running the put objects, because again, if we go back, where am I? Here, and we just look at that bucket policy again. The bucket policy says if you want to run a put object, you must come through this endpoint, and we're not doing that. And it's a gateway endpoint, so we can't see it, right, from outside of the VPC. I should be able to run a get object command, though. If I go back here, what did we leave? We just left the test image there, the test text file. So I go back over to PyCharm, and we do AWS S3 CP, and again, we copy this / test.txt to test images. Oh, I didn't give it enough permissions. There's some additional permissions. But see what we've done here? Now what we've done is we've controlled access to some, let's say, high value calls like delete objects, to basically you got to come through that VPC endpoint. And if we go back to the original sort of reference diagram that we used at the beginning of this, if we flip over here, what we now have is we could maybe change this diagram a little bit, and we could kind of show it like this. This line for our EC2 instance, let's just make this easy and we'll go like this. This line no longer applies, right? Because what's happening is from that EC2 instance, we're going through the gateway endpoint to talk to that machine. And if I was to change this just a tiny bit more, I know this part of the demo didn't work exactly the way I'd hoped it to, but if you think about this piece, really what's happening, really what we've done now is we've said that if I drew it like this, sort of dotted line to here, certain activities are allowed because we didn't deny all access to S3 actions from something other than the VPC endpoint. But you could see when I tried to run a delete or I know the get didn't work because I don't have exactly the right permissions there, but the idea now is we're controlling access to that S3 bucket by using a bucket policy. Okay. And if I was just to draw a little more on this diagram and to take that concept that we talked about earlier on, we've got this idea of multiple layers of protection. So we could have, oh man, let's try that again. We could have here a policy document, and we have here a policy document. Multiple layers of protection. Remember that when you're trying to perform an action in AWS, that all of the applicable policy documents are evaluated as a whole. So when I'm running these commands from my laptop, I'm actually, in theory, with this example, let's say we have both of these policies in place. My action is evaluated against the any identity policies that are assigned to, in this case, I'm assuming a role. So any identity policies assigned to that role. And then in our example, we must also evaluate that action against the bucket policy in this diagram. So that's this piece right here. And then we could go a step farther. I know we didn't do it today, but we could go a step farther and have this policy document associated with our gateway endpoint. So now we got to make it through multiple verification processes. Are you allowed to perform this action? And that's the real power of something like IAM, is very granular control and multiple layers of protection. Okay. So I think what we'll do is we will call it here for the week. Let's see, we got through a fair amount, and that's about 2 hours. It's a pretty good stream. So we'll call it here. We'll be back next week to continue learning about how we can use CloudFormation to build out our environments and manage our environments. Maybe we'll use some more Dwarf Fortress examples. So enjoy the rest of your week, folks. Thanks for hanging out with me for a couple hours here tonight, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.